Genesis 5, verse 9. And Enos lived 90 years and begot Cainan. I hope I pronounced their names right. But there's 90. Genesis 5, verse 12. This is the next person. Cainan, I guess maybe, lived 70 years. There's 70. And begot Mahalaleel. Next person in line. This is going from the people right on down, in line. That's 70 years there. Genesis 5, verse 15. And Mahalaleel lived 65 years and begot Jared. Mark that down if you got your pen. Okay, there's 65 years. And Genesis 5, verse 18, Jared lived 162 years and begot Enoch. 162. This is coming up to the flood. You'll see in a minute. 162, Jared. Now remember, Jared was Noah's great-grandpa. Methuselah was Noah's grandpa. And Lamech was his dad. We'll get to that in a minute. But Genesis 5:21, and Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. Remember, he was the oldest one to live in the Bible. 969 years. Methuselah, that's Noah's grandpa. Keep that in mind. Genesis 5:25, and Methuselah lived after he begot Lamech. No, I'm on the wrong verse. 5:25. Methuselah lived 187 years and begot Lamech. Okay, and then Genesis 5:28. Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son, Noah. 182 more years. Now, where you add this all up, all those figures add up, but there's one more thing you got to add to come out with a Genesis 7:11. Genesis 7:11, it says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month and 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up and the windows of heaven were open. 600 years and two, I didn't add up the months, but 600 years, and that's when the rain and the flooding started. So, you add all them up, and I've added it up, and I went over it 3 or 4 times. That comes out to 1,656 years after God created Adam and Eve. That's when it actually was. That might vary a little bit. Say, for instance, where it says Methuselah begot Lamech at a certain age, does that begot mean they was conceived then or born then? I think born then. That's my opinion. But anyway, all of those years added up come out to 1,656 years. That's approximately when the flood started. Now, it might vary a little bit. I might be off a little bit, but basically I believe it's right on. Now, there's some other information in the Bible. For one is Lamech, that's Noah's dad. He died 5 years before the flood. Let's see that. Genesis 5, verse 30. Genesis 5, verse 30. Now, recall that Noah was 600 years old when the waters were broken up and the flood started. He was 600 years old. But see what it says in Genesis 5, verse 30. He says, and Lamech lived after he begot Noah 595 years. Remember the 600th year of Noah's life? The flood started. So he died 5 years before the flood. You know, it may be that he even helped Noah on the ark. You know, I don't know, this is somewhat speculation, possibly, but he did pronounce a blessing on Noah when he was born, you know. He said this, and he called his name Noah, saying, verse 29, the same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. So Lamech may have been helping Noah or something. I don't know. That's speculation, of course. But anyway, now, Noah's grandpa, Methuselah, you can calculate in the Bible that he died the year of the flood, or he drowned by the flood. So let's look at Genesis 5, verse 26. Genesis 5, verse 26. And Methuselah, remember that's Noah's grandpa, and Jared was his great-grandpa. Methuselah, 26, lived after he begot Lamech 782 years. Mark that down, 782. Now, look what it says about Lamech. He said, let me get where I'm at here now. Anyway, Methuselah lived 782 years after he begot Lamech. And but anyway, Lamech, okay, here it is. All the days of Lamech, you know, as long as he lived, that's verse 31, were 777 years. So if Methuselah lived 782 years after he begot Lamech, and you deduct how long Lamech lived, 777 years, you subtract them, that's 5 years. Methuselah lived 5 years longer than Lamech did. Remember, but the flood started in the 600th year of Noah's life, which was 5 years before, when Lamech died. It's kind of complicated, but think about it and you can figure it out too. Oh, me. But anyway, Lamech lived 777 years, and Methuselah lived 782 years after he begot Lamech. So there's a 5-year difference, and that would put it the time of the flood. So he could have died a month or two before the flood started, but he could have died during the flood. It don't make any difference. He's dead and don't know nothing about it. It all come out the same. But that is when, he did die that year. But anyway, when did Noah start on the ark? It says that Genesis 6:3. Genesis 6:3, and it says, and the Lord said, my spirit will not always strive with man, for he also is flesh, talking about carnal-minded people, I guess. Yet his days shall be 120 years. This apparently was, God was saying, there's going to be another 120 more years, and I'm going to do something. Flood the earth. Did God tell Noah that at the time? Did Noah work on the ark 120 years before the flood? He did. I don't know exactly. But God did say there's going to be another 120 more years, and then he's going to do something about it. But anyway, now Genesis 5:32, back up a few verses. And Noah was 500 years old. Now if he started on the ark, the flood happened in the 600th year, and if God was telling him here that 120 more years, I'm going to do something with mankind. If that is so, it says Noah was 500 years old and he begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Of course, you know, all of those 4 men and their 4 wives, they survived the flood. But anyway, that would have made them, his sons, 100 years old when the flood started. Because it started when Noah was 600. So, anyway, God said he repented that he had made man, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord, verse 7, chapter 6, verse 7, and the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air. For it repents me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah was a just and perfect man, you know, in his generations. And Noah walked with God. Noah was God's servant. So, did Noah start on the ark at 480 years? God said 120 years, and I'm going to do something about it. If he did, that made him work on the ark about 20 years by himself, even before his sons were born. And that would have made them, had been around 20 years old, before they could have helped him, which that would have been 40 years that Noah would have been working on it, if he started on it at 480 years old. That's somewhat speculation. The Bible is not, to me, precisely clear on some things, and then other things, the Bible is clear. It just takes some thinking about it. What is God saying? How does this go? How does this apply? But anyway, Methuselah apparently died the year of the flood, or drowned in the flood, whichever it is. Someday we'll know. But anyway, Cain had started children, you know, the Cain that killed Abel. He had started a bunch of children, and a bunch of their names are in the Bible. And you know, it's kind of was confusing to me for a while, you know. Cain's children was named almost identical to Adam's children. They was real similar. Some of them was real similar names. But anyway, it's first talking about Cain's children, then later on it talks about Adam's children. But anyway, Noah had, you know, it says in Genesis 4:22. Now this is some of Cain's genealogies, some of his children, great-grandchildren or something like that. But anyway, Genesis 4:22, it says, and Zillah, that's one of the wives of Lamech. Let's read verse 19. And Lamech, now remember that would have been Cain's probably great-great-grandson, or great-grandson. I'd have to figure him out here. But verse 19, and Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. And Adah bare Jabal. He was the father of such that dwell in tents and such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was a musician. He was the father of all such as handled the harp in Oregon. You've heard about Alabama Jubilee and having a jubilee, you know, singing and playing music. But apparently Jubal was into that. And Zillah, verse 22, and Zillah, now this is the wife of Lamech. She also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. Brass and iron makes bronze. That's a durable thing that don't corrode and stuff, and it's some pretty good stuff bronze is. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. But anyway, I want to tell you about that Tubal-Cain who worked with metal, bronze. So, but anyway, Tubal-Cain they made knives and hatchets and stuff like that. And about 5 years ago, in the Swiss Alps, I didn't cut the article out of the newspaper, news magazine, whatever I saw it in, but I did read it. About 5 years ago, it was an exceptionally hot summer in the Swiss Alps. You know, there are big, high mountains that reach snow-covered in the summertime. And the snow had melted back up on the mountainside a pretty good ways. And they found the man there, dead. He had a bronze knife and a bronze hatchet on him, strapped to his side. They took that man and carbon dated him or tested him some way. And I remember reading the article, and I wish I'd have cut it out now. But it said that he was 4,350 years that he had been dead. That makes that man one of the people that died in Noah's flood. Remember, it's 1656. Subtract 4,350 from that, you would come real close to that time frame. And especially the bronze hatchet and knife that he had on him. But anyway, if I just kept that article, I could read it. All I can do is tell you kind of about it now, but I do remember a lot of the details about it. But that guy drowned, I believe, during Noah's flood. Because when the flood started, people started scurrying up the mountainside. Head to the hills, head to the hills. They felt that they could get above the water and still be all right, you know. The people was probably the only ones that were smart enough to try to head for the hills, you know, to get above the drowning water. Animals probably stayed down lower and drowned. I believe that anyway. But people, they was trying to circumvent God's curse of you're going to drown. You know, the earth's going to be flooded. Noah warned people about the flood that was coming. They come and laughed and sniggered at him. They didn't believe it. The Bible says they knew not. They didn't know it. Because if they'd have known it, they would have done something about it. But anyway, that guy was 4,350 years old. And that's one time that they, I believe, when they carbon tested, carbon dated stuff, that they really got accurate on that. But look at all of the snow-capped mountains. Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Hood in Oregon, the mountains in South Africa, I forget the Kilimanjaro, I guess, Mount Fuji in Japan. All of these snow-capped mountains, and people were spread about on pretty well on the whole face of the earth. There wasn't as many people as there is now, but there was a lot of people. So you had 1,700 years of people having children. That adds up pretty fast, you know. But anyway, all of these people tried to go to the top of the mountains. They probably said, head to the hills, head to the hills. You know, you got to stay above the water. And they went up as far as they could go, and the water kept on coming up after them. I think the Bible says that it's about 15 cubits above the highest mountain. That's around 45 feet above the highest mountain. If a cubit's around 3 foot, close to 3 foot. But anyway, the water finally claimed them all. They all perished, the Bible says, except the ones that's on the ark. So, how many people are there, you reckon, on these snow-capped mountains? I believe there's millions, maybe billion or more. They all went to the top of the hill. The water come up and drowned them. They settled back down to the ground again. And then as the Noah's Ark went down and the water receded and receded, the snow and ice returned to these mountains. Mount Hood, Mount Fuji, and other Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Ararat in Turkey. That's where the ark is landed. Eastern Turkey, Mount Ararat. The ark settled down there, and that's where they come off of it there at. But they went on down, and the cold and snow and stuff finally covered up the ark. It's preserved and underneath the ice and snow. Because you remember, as you get higher and higher in the hills, it gets colder and colder. But people tried their best to live, you know, to get above the water. You can't stand a chance in that water. But it finally claimed them all. So, there's many snow-covered mountains on this earth. I don't know that all of them had people scary them up them, but I'd say many of them did. And I'd say that if there was people around those high mountains, they clumb up there, they eventually drowned, settled back down, sunk to the bottom, which they would have been more or less on top of the mountain. They'd have sunk there. Snowing, the water went down, the snow and ice, the cold returned, snow and ice, and it preserved them. I believe that there's probably millions of people underneath these snow-capped mountains waiting for God to call them. All shall hear the voice of the Son of Man and shall come forth. God's not going to let anyone miss. He's going to take care of everybody. They will all come out of the grave. Some, of course, will come up for destruction, but hopefully most will come up for life, to be converted. Because the people in Noah's flood, they didn't know what they was doing. They thought they did. They had a good life at Noah. But they, hopefully, when they come up in the resurrection, and Noah says, now listen to me, I believe they'll have a different tune to sing then. They'll have different thoughts. But anyway, they tried to escape, but they drowned nevertheless. They sank to the top of the mountains. The snow and ice returned as the water went down. The colder stuff, the cold snow and ice, returned to the high mountains because it's colder up there. But that put them in refrigeration, froze. That's why they could, you know, they could check this man that they found. They said, where in the world did he come from? He's been underneath the snow up here. They checked him out. They was accurate in that. But anyway, that covering of snow and ice returned, and all these people, many of them, I believe, millions perhaps, maybe even more, much more than that, are there and underneath the snow and ice. It's the same difference. It's digging a hole in the ground 4, 5, 6 foot and putting the body in there and covering it up with dirt. It's all the same thing. They're all dead, and they can't do nothing about it. Are they in God's care? I think so. I hope so, and I believe so, because God is a God of love. You know, when my mother died several years ago, we went to the monument company to pick out a stone for her and put her name and stuff like that. And they had a paper, just pages of stuff of gone to be with Jesus, asleep with Jesus, you know, gone on to heaven, you know, all kinds of saying. They'd put anything you chose, you put it on there. And I looked over all of them. It's probably 2 or 3 pages of epitaphs that they would put whatever you wanted on there. There was only one thing that was appropriate for her. He said, in God's care. And she is in God's care. Not only her, but billions of people. How many people have been born since Adam and Eve? There's over 7 billion on the earth now. Can you imagine 6,000 years of people living and dying? It'll be so many billions that we just can't comprehend it. But anyway, I do believe that these, according to the Iceman that they found in the Swiss Alps, there would be many more people that are dead awaiting God's call, waiting for God to say, arise. And they will. They'll come out of the snow, whatever. They'll probably come up through the snow, same as somebody, God calling somebody out of the grave. You know, the dead people, when Christ returns and calls the dead out of not the converted ones, the unconverted ones, out of the grave, you know what they're going to say? Our hope is lost. Why in the world do they do that? Simple, logical. They hoped they would go to heaven. They hoped they would go to nirvana like the Muslims. Well, I'm going to be on a cloud floating around plucking on a harp or whatever. And they come up. This is where we was buried at. And we thought, sure, we was so confident we was going to happy hunting ground in the sky. The Indians believed that. They're going to come up and they're going to fight. Our hope is lost. We're in trouble now with God. He's probably going to get us now. But he ain't. He's going to get them in love and in conversion. Most of them, I'd say the vast majority of people will be at least come to know God. And hopefully they will be converted too, as we are. But anyway, their hope won't be lost. But when they first come out of the grave, that's exactly what they were going to think. My grandma told my dad, you know, when she's on her deathbed, just ready to die. Roosevelt, that's my dad's name. I'm going on to heaven, and I want you to meet me there when you die. I will, Mom. I'll be there. She comes up in the grave and says, this ain't heaven. This is the Bruce graveyard where we was buried. And probably the first thing they're going to think when they come out of the grave is, we've messed up bad, and God's probably going to get us now because we hoped we was going to go to heaven. We see that's error. They'll soon see and understand when God's people goes there. Can any of you go to your relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, grandpas, grandmas who were not converted? Can you go to them and explain to them, teach them about God's way? Can you say, don't be worried. God's in all this. God has brought you to life. Now, you used to laugh at me and told me I had a weird religion, and they do. I've had people tell me, you're a good guy, Scott, but you've got a weird religion. But someday, then they'll see. They don't today. Christ said people that are deceived, leave them alone. They don't know what they're doing. Well, if they don't know what, they would know what they're doing if God called them and opened up the books of the Bible to them, Genesis to Revelation. So, God is still in control. I don't care if there is millions of people on these mountains under the snow. Maybe billions. I don't know how many, but a lot. I certainly believe a whole lot of people. God, they are in God's care. God will do something about them someday when Christ returns and the end of the 1,000-year reign, the great white throne judgment, the last great day. That's when God's going to set his hand to save a lot of people. Of course, he's going to save a lot of people during a 1,000-year reign too. That's where we get to help people. We get to help them to get on God's straight path, the straight and narrow path. But, you know, I thought about the raven. You know, my mind a lot of times is whirling around, I guess, thinking about things. But Noah turned the raven loose. You know, the mountains were beginning to be seen, the tops of the mountain. The water's going on down. And Noah finally opened up a window and got the raven and turned it out. It flew off, and it did not return to, the Bible says it did not return to him. That raven did not die because it had to be the one with the female raven that was still on the ark to start the raven generation. What was it doing? I told some people, and I believe surely this is right, it's the only explanation. That raven, it's yucky. But that raven, they eat dead stuff. That raven was all eating on dead people. That had been in the ark for about 11 and a half months, and it was so glad to get out, and there was plenty of food for it to eat out there on the ground. Up at the mountaintop, remember the ark is going down, it was out there cabbaging, eating on dead people, and it didn't want to go back in the ark because it was out there smorgasbord. And then it says, the raven returned not, and waited a week, and then he turned the dove loose, and the dove flew out, and it returned to Noah. There's probably a good reason why that dove returned to Noah. My speculation. I hope I'm converted. But the dove, the crow, the raven was out there having a good time. Eating, being happy. Got all kinds of meat here to eat, and I'm just happy to all get out. But the dove returned to Noah because there was so much dead carnage on top of them mountains that it didn't have a place to rest down. It didn't want to fly down in light. And all those dead people and all those dead items that was decaying there. That's what I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. Speculation somewhat. But the dove returned not. So Noah took the dove back in. The ark settled down another week. And he turned it loose again. And then it flew out and come back with an olive leaf in its mouth. The water was getting down far enough away from the dead people that, and stuff was starting to grow, but I believe there are two reasons the differences in the birds is the raven was having a good time and the dove didn't want to land in all that carnage. Because they don't like dead stuff. I'm sure they don't, but the crows and buzzards and ravens, they do. But anyway, that's what I believe. And I believe that I'm converted. And I believe that if God says, you was wrong about all that stuff, Scott, I'll say, well, forgive me. And what is, the right? But I believe that is what happened. The raven liked it because there was plenty of stuff to eat on. The dove didn't like it because there was a lot of dead stuff it didn't want to be around that dead stuff. But after the water receded about 2 more weeks, went on down the mountain, then it flew down there and found an olive plant that was growing and got a leaf in its mouth and returned to Noah. And then Noah stayed in the ark another week, and then they went out. That's my opinion on situations. And I do believe it's right. I do believe I'm converted, even though sometimes I think I ain't. Or if I am, barely maybe. But anyway, so that's what I believe. That's the differences in the two birds. And the dove refused to land among the many dead bodies, and it returned to Noah until water receded more. And it got down farther way down on the mountainside, and there was green grass growing, there was olive trees growing, and there was basically nothing down there that was offensive to the dove. But anyway, I hope that all of this has been right. Mostly it has. The dates, times. Some of it was speculation about the dove and the raven. But anyway, thank you all for coming. Not lasted too long, about 45 minutes. But anyway, I guess it's concluded.